Very rarely in life do you get to meet individuals that exude love and compassion and philanthropy through such altruistic means. Our next speaker has been one of the top supporters of conservative causes such as CPAC and conservative candidates all across the country. And when I first met him, he told me one of the funniest stories I've ever heard, and I'm going to have to recreate it, and hopefully I'm not stealing the opening line to his speech. Our next speaker, Foster Fries, comes from the wonderful state of Wyoming, a beautiful, beautiful state. But when he first met me, he said, Charlie, I live my life by the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians. And one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. So no matter what you say, no matter what anybody else says, I cannot get mad, no matter what you do. If my wife gets all upset, I won't get upset because I'm in control of myself. Now, Foster said this at a Tea Party meeting to the whole group of individuals. And a Tea Party member at the back of the room stood up and said, "You're a liberal." And Foster said, "Now that offends me." Ladies and gentlemen, Foster Fries.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, you're crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
Well, Charlie, thank you very much for that introduction. I've managed to figure out the successful life these days. Now, it's taken me a while to do it, but it's 4 little secrets. You need a good dog, good horse, good woman. 10 days ago, into my life came a John Deere tractor. I've got it all put together now. I'm on this bush hog up on my northern Wisconsin property, cutting out trees 4 inches big, and it's instant gratification. I'd like to share with you a new thought about a term. We can shift it from being a social conservative to being a cultural conservative. Now, I'll describe a little bit what a cultural conservative is a little bit later on, but a cultural conservative promotes the values that sustain society. And this would allow us to heal the rift that now exists in our Republican Party, because we have these shared values, these values that we all believe in. And they're not just Republican values, they're American values, but our party is the one that espouses those values. And the importance of bringing together everyone as a team is best indicated by this young fellow who runs his car in the ditch out in West Texas after a rainstorm, buries it up to his hubcaps with mud, calls the farmer to put on his big old horse in front of him and says, "Pull Todd, nothing happens. Pull Jim, nothing happens. Pull Fred, nothing happens. Pull Homer." Pulls them out easy, slick as can be. Young kids, that's pretty impressive, but why do you have to call your horse 4 names before he'll do anything? Well, you see, son, Homer's blind. If he thought he's the only one pulling, he wouldn't give a dang. So let's think of some examples of what is cultural conservative. We were raised with the Good Samaritan story. I ran out of gas, and a young fellow took me to the gas station, brought me back, and said, "You're a Good Samaritan." 17-year-old had no context of which I spoke. We all know the story that the Samaritans and the Jews did not like each other. And the Samaritan spots the injured Jew on the side of the road and says, "Oh, man, let me take you to the inn." Puts him on his donkey, gives the innkeeper money, says, if it doesn't take care of all of his expenses, when I get back, I'll give you some more money. So that was part of our notion that health care wasn't considered a right, it was a responsibility. We are our brother's keeper. A second point, freedom of religion. We were taught in our culture that you respected other people's religion. You might not agree with it, you might violently disagree, but you respected their right to believe that. This is embedded in our culture, freedom of religion. Now, and I'm not coming from a Catholic background personally, but we have a government imposing a state religion that imposes on Catholics certain things that violate their very core beliefs. This is a cultural shift that we have to fight and maintain the original culture of freedom of religion. A third example could be indicated by, you maybe saw on Hannity, has this young kid brags about having fathered 20 kids with 14 different mothers. Now, the neat thing about including that in our cultural conservatives is we have to deal with this out-of-wedlock birth situation. It's an opportunity for the fiscal conservatives to have a light bulb go on and say, gee, maybe I better be a cultural conservative to deal with this issue, because who's going to be paying for the child support for those 14 kids? That guy ain't. The fiscal conservative is going to pay for it. He's going to pay for all the cost of dealing with the murders and prison sentences that some of those 14-year-old kids are going to generate because there's no father present. So if we think of the concept of never say anything bad. If you can't say, my mother used to say, if you can't say something good about someone, don't say anything at all. We never spent our lives demeaning and denigrating other people. Now people's wealth on some of these TV shows are predicated on how degrading and demeaning they can be. This is a cultural thing that we have to fight and resist. The work ethic. So many people talk about, well, we got to give jobs, we have to have employment to put bread on the table. It's more than just bread on the table. Work is a spiritual excitement about your contributing. Arthur Brooks of American Enterprise Institute, I encourage you to get to know his message. He talks about earned success, and that's what creates happiness. They've done studies on happiness, and it's shown that it doesn't matter what level of income you're at. If you're contributing, you feel good about yourself. And so to get people back to work, it's more than just food on the table. It's to give them that excitement and that spiritual joy of knowing they're contributing. So how do we transfer these ideas to our kids? Knowledge is transferable, and passion is transferable. But transferring knowledge will only take you to the end of your desk. Passion can take you to the end of the world. So if we want to transfer these ideas to our kids, the cheapest thing we can do is read to them. The most expensive thing we can do for our kids is not to read for them. So that's kind of a little axiom, I think, that makes a great deal of sense. Aristotle said, if we train the mind but don't treat the heart, that's not education at all. And Plato said the main thrust of education is to teach our children to desire the right things. So as I part, two little stories. One about the importance of education. In Wyoming, we sometimes need a deputy sheriff. So the sheriff calls the fellow in. He doesn't ask for a resume. He doesn't ask them to fill out forms. Just ask questions, see how savvy the kid is. So he says, you know who killed Abraham Lincoln? Gee, I really don't. So he goes back to his wife, you get the job, honey? Yeah, I think so. They already had me work on a big murder case. So let me tell you how excited I am about the possibility of all of us becoming cultural warriors, cultural conservatives. The very fact that you've showed up here today gives me great hope that people care. And that's all it takes, is people with your kind of intelligence, with the resources you have, with your education, your background, your passion, that our country has a great future because of you. And Cicero said, why did they give Caesar such a rough time? What about all the people that are cheering him in the forum? Those are the people you and I have to convince. So we get our fellow man trained and educated to know what are the cultural values they need to embrace that's going to make our country prosperous in so many ways, spiritually and economically. So my parting story about education, my favorite school joke, is about the mother goes to the second story bedroom and says, Jim, you get out of bed and get to school. You're going to be late for school. I'm not going to school. The teachers hate me. The kids hate me. I'm not going. Tell me why I should go. I'll give you 2 reasons to go. Number 1, I'm your mother. I'm telling you to go. And number 2, you're 42 years old and the principal. God bless.